What happens when a beloved icon American with decades of respect collides with a polarizing figure desperate to control every narrative? When Jennifer Hudson agreed to appear on the same late-night panel, nobody expected the evening to spiral into one of the most explosive confrontations in television history. The atmosphere started cordial enough, two successful women sharing the stage, but beneath the surface, tensions were already brewing. Tonight, witness how Jennifer Hudson's legendary grace gave way to something far more powerful when pushed beyond her limits. The studio lights of The Tonight Show gleamed against the familiar backdrop as Jimmy Fallon shuffled his index cards with that trademark nervous energy. The audience buzzed with anticipation, knowing they were about to witness something special. Two powerhouse women would share the couch tonight, each carrying their own weight of fame, controversy, and expectation. Jennifer Hudson walked onto the stage first, her presence commanding immediate respect. Dressed in an elegant burgundy blazer, she moved with the confidence of someone who had earned every accolade through sheer talent and determination. The audience erupted in genuine applause, the kind reserved for artists who had touched souls with their voice and won hearts with their authenticity. She waved gracefully, her smile warm and unguarded, before settling onto the famous couch with practiced ease. Moments later, Meghan Markle emerged from backstage, her entrance deliberately calculated for maximum impact. She wore a cream-colored designer dress that caught the studio lights perfectly, her hair styled in those signature loose waves. Her stride was measured, purposeful, carrying the bearing of someone accustomed to being watched and analyzed. The applause was polite but noticeably cooler, the audience unsure of what to expect from the former royal who had divided public opinion across continents. She offered that practiced smile, the one that had graced countless magazine covers, before taking her seat beside Jennifer with a slight nod of acknowledgement. Jimmy launched into his opening remarks with characteristic enthusiasm, welcoming both guests with equal warmth while trying to navigate the obvious tension that already seemed to fill the studio air. Jennifer, thank you for being here tonight. Your latest album has been getting incredible reviews. How does it feel to continue evolving as an artist after all these years? Jennifer's response was immediate and genuine, her voice carrying that rich timbre that had made her famous. It feels like coming home every time I step into the studio or onto a stage. Music has always been my truth, my way of connecting with people who might be going through their own struggles or celebrations. The audience responded warmly, sensing the authenticity in her words. Jimmy turned to Meghan with that same bright energy. And Meghan, you've been keeping busy with various projects and initiatives. What's next on your horizon? Meghan straightened slightly, her smile shifting into something more calculated. Well, Jimmy, I'm always focused on amplifying voices that need to be heard, on creating content that actually matters rather than just entertainment for entertainment's sake. The subtle dig wasn't lost on anyone in the studio, least of all Jennifer, whose eyebrow raised almost imperceptibly. The conversation continued with Jimmy trying to maintain his usual lighthearted tone, while both women offered answers that seemed to circle around each other like verbal sparring partners testing their reach. When he asked about their different paths to fame, the responses revealed the growing divide between them. Jennifer spoke about grinding through auditions, facing rejection, working multiple jobs while pursuing her dream of using her voice to touch lives. Her story was one of persistence, talent eventually recognized, and gratitude for every opportunity earned through sweat and determination. Meghan's narrative took a different turn entirely. She spoke about recognizing platforms and using visibility to create change, about refusing to accept limitations placed by others, about the importance of controlling your own story in a world that would rather define you. Her words carried an edge, an underlying suggestion that some people simply accepted what was given to them while others fought for more. Jennifer listened with growing tension in her posture, her professional smile beginning to tighten around the edges. The first real crack appeared when Jimmy asked about handling scrutiny. Jennifer's response was measure criticism and public, everyone thoughtful, dadi and faces criticism, especially when you're in the public eye. But I've learned that the work speaks for itself. If you stay focused on your craft, on serving your audience with authenticity, the noise becomes just that noise. You can't control what people say, but you can control the quality of what you put out into the world. The audience murmured appreciatively at her wisdom. Meghan's reply carried a sharper tone. Some people have the luxury of letting their work speak for itself because they're not fighting systemic barriers or dealing with coordinated attacks designed to silence them. When you're challenging established power structures, criticism isn't just noise. It's weaponized to make you disappear. The implication hung heavy in the air like smoke. Jennifer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she maintained her composure. Jimmy, sensing the growing tension, tried to steer toward lighter territory by asking about their favorite aspects of performing and connecting with audiences. Jennifer's face lit up as she described the moment when a song reaches someone at exactly the right time in their life, how music could heal wounds and celebrate victories in ways that nothing else could touch. Her passion was infectious, genuine, drawing nods and smiles from the studio audience who could feel her sincerity radiating through the screen. Meghan's response focused on the responsibility that came with platforms, about using visibility to highlight injustices and create awareness around issues that traditional to ignore. While media preferred her words were carefully chosen and technically admirable, they carried an undertone of superiority, as if she alone understood the weight of true purpose while others merely entertained. The contrast between genuine passion and calculated positioning became increasingly obvious with each exchange. The atmosphere grew more charged when Jimmy brought up their different approaches to privacy and public life. Jennifer spoke about finding balance, protecting her family while remaining accessible, how to fans had supported her journey. She emphasized gratitude for her career while acknowledging the challenges that came with fame, but never presenting herself as a victim of her own success. Her words carried the wisdom of someone who had navigated both triumph and heartbreak in the public eye without losing her essential humanity. Meghan's perspective painted a different picture entirely. She spoke about privacy as a fundamental right that shouldn't be sacrificed for public consumption, about the difference between choosing to share your story and having it stolen from you. Her tone grew more pointed as she described the challenges of maintaining authenticity in a world that demanded performance, seemingly oblivious to the irony of making these statements while sitting on a late-night talk show promoting her latest media venture. Jennifer shifted in her seat, her professional mask beginning to show strain. The subtle digs, the veiled superiority, the constant positioning of herself as uniquely victimized were clearly wearing on someone who had faced her own share of genuine struggles without turning them into a brand. When Jimmy asked about advice they would give to young women entering the entertainment industry, the divide became a chasm. Jennifer's advice was heartfelt and practical. Work harder than everyone else in the room, respect the people who came before you, and lift up those coming behind you. Never let anyone convince you that your dreams are too big, but also understand that dreams require sacrifice, persistence, and humility. Success isn't just about talent, it's about character, and character is tested when nobody's watching. The audience responded with genuine appreciation, sensing the hard-earned wisdom behind her words. Meghan's response was markedly different in both tone and content. Don't let anyone put you in a box or define your worth based on their limited imagination. You have to be willing to challenge systems that weren't built for you, to speak truth to power even when it's uncomfortable. Some people will try to silence you because your voice threatens their comfort, but your authenticity is your superpower, and you should never apologize for taking up space that belongs to you. The words sounded rehearsed, like talking points from a media training session rather than genuine advice born from experience. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface was now impossible to ignore. Jennifer's hands had clasped tighter in her lap, her smile becoming more forced with each passing moment. The audience could sense something brewing, that electric feeling that comes before a storm breaks. Jimmy, ever the professional, continued trying to maintain the show's upbeat energy while clearly aware that his stage had become a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark was about to come in the form of a seemingly innocent question about collaboration and supporting other women in the industry. What Jimmy intended as a feel-good moment about female empowerment was about to trigger an exchange that would dominate headlines for weeks to come and reveal the true character of both women when pushed beyond their carefully maintained public personas. The question about collaboration arrived like a match thrown into gasoline. Jimmy leaned forward with genuine enthusiasm, completely unaware of the explosive moment he was about to create. So ladies, the industry has really embraced the idea of women supporting women. Have you found opportunities to lift each other up? And what does that collaboration look like in your respective fields? Jennifer's response came naturally, her voice carrying the warmth that had endeared her to millions. Absolutely. I've been blessed to work with incredible women who opened doors and showed me what was possible. Maya Angelou once told me that when you learn, teach, when you get, give. That's been my philosophy. Whether it's mentoring young singers or supporting causes that matter, we rise by lifting others. It's not about competition. There's room for everyone to shine. The studio audience murmured appreciatively, feeling the genuine sentiment behind her words. But before Jimmy could transition to Meghan, Jennifer continued, her tone shifting slightly. Of course, supporting each other means being honest, too. Real support isn't just about public praise, it's about accountability, about helping each other grow, about not letting ego get in the way of actual progress. Meghan's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Her smile remained fixed, but something dangerous flickered behind her eyes. That's interesting, Jennifer. I find it fascinating when people talk about accountability while sitting in positions they never had to fight for. Some of us have had to challenge entire systems just to get a seat at tables that others were born into. The temperature in the studio dropped noticeably. Jennifer's head tilted slightly, her professional composure wavering as the implication hit home. Meghan pressed on, her voice maintaining its polished tone while delivering what could only be described as a calculated strike. I mean, when you come up through traditional channels, when the industry embraces you because you fit a certain mold, it's easy to talk about lifting others. But some of us have had to create our own platforms because the existing ones weren't designed for voices like ours. Jennifer's eyes narrowed, her legendary patience beginning to fray. The audience could sense the shift, the way the air itself seemed to crackle with tension. Jimmy's smile had become strained, his hands fidgeting with his cards as he realized his show was veering into dangerous territory. Jennifer leaned forward slightly, her voice still controlled but carrying an edge that hadn't been there moments before. I find it interesting when people assume they know someone's journey without walking a step in their shoes. My seat wasn't given to me, Meghan. It was earned through years of auditions, rejections, and proving myself over and over again. I came from nothing, and I never forget that. Meghan's laugh was light, but there was no warmth in it. Of course, I didn't mean to diminish your journey. I'm simply pointing out that some paths are more readily available than others. Some voices are easier for the industry to accept, to package, to celebrate. Others have to fight against centuries of tradition and expectation. The subtext was clear, and Jennifer had heard enough. Her composure, built through decades of professionalism, finally cracked. Her voice remained steady, but the steel beneath it was now unmistakable. Let me be very clear about something, Meghan. My voice wasn't easily accepted. My body, my background, my dreams were all questioned, criticized, and dismissed by people who thought they knew better. I've faced racism, sexism, and every other ism you can imagine, but I never used those struggles as an excuse to tear down other women or to claim some kind of unique victimhood. The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Even Jimmy seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment play out. Meghan's mask slipped slightly, her carefully maintained composure showing the first real crack. Jennifer wasn't finished. She leaned back in her chair, her voice dropping to that rich, resonant tone that had made her famous, but now it carried the weight of years of earned wisdom. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about it. Real accountability means owning your choices, your mistakes, your part in every situation. It means not blaming everyone else when things don't go your way. It means understanding that respect is earned through actions, not demanded through grievance. The audience was transfixed, sensing they were witnessing something rare and unrehearsed. Meghan shifted in her seat, her hands clasping tighter as she searched for a response. Jennifer continued, her words measured but devastating in their quiet authority. I've watched you on interviews, read your statements, seen how you present yourself to the world, and what I see is someone who wants all the benefits of fame, all the platforms, all the attention, but none of the responsibility that comes with it. You want to be seen as a victim and a hero simultaneously? That's not authenticity, Meghan. That's performance art. Meghan's cheeks flushed, her voice rising slightly as she fought to regain control. That's incredibly presumptuous of you to judge my experience or my motivations. You don't know what I've endured, the sacrifices I've made, the courage it took to walk away from everything. Jennifer's response was swift and surgical. Courage? Walking away isn't courage, especially when you profit from the walking. Courage is staying when things get difficult. Courage is serving something bigger than yourself. Courage is building others up instead of tearing institutions down for your own gain. The words landed like physical blows. Meghan's mouth opened, then closed, her usual arsenal of prepared responses seeming to abandon her in the face of Jennifer's unvarnished honesty. The silence stretched uncomfortably as millions watched a masterclass in how genuine strength responds to manufactured controversy. Jimmy finally found his voice, attempting to lighten the mood. Well, clearly, we have two very passionate women here with different perspectives on their journeys. But before Meghan could respond, Jennifer delivered what would become the most quoted moment of the entire exchange. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried the authority of someone who had earned every word through lived experience. Passion is one thing, Jimmy, but wisdom comes from understanding that your pain doesn't make you special. Your struggles don't give you the right to diminish others. And your platform doesn't exist in a vacuum. Real strength isn't about how loud you can complain about your circumstances. It's about how gracefully you rise above them while helping others do the same. The studio remained silent, the audience unsure whether to applaud or simply absorb the gravity of what they'd witnessed. Meghan sat rigid in her chair, her face a mask of barely contained fury and humiliation. For perhaps the first time in years, she was truly speechless, faced with a woman whose authenticity made her own carefully crafted image look hollow by comparison. Jennifer turned slightly toward the camera, her expression softening as she addressed the viewers directly. To anyone watching who's facing real struggles, real discrimination, real hardship, know that your worth isn't measured by how loudly you can proclaim your victimhood. It's measured by how you treat others, how you use whatever platform you have, and whether you leave the world a little better than you found it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the crew seemed afraid to move, knowing they had captured something extraordinary, something that would be replayed and analyzed for months to come. Meghan's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, her usual poise completely shattered by the calm devastation of Jennifer's words. Jimmy cleared his throat softly, his usual comedic timing abandoned as he struggled to navigate the wreckage of what had been intended as a light-hearted segment. The studio lights seemed harsher now, casting sharp shadows across faces that revealed more than either guest had probably intended to show. "Ladies," he began tentatively, his voice lacking its characteristic bounce. "Perhaps we can shift gears and talk about your upcoming projects." But Meghan wasn't ready to let the moment pass. Her composure, though visibly shaken, reassembled itself into something harder, more defiant. She straightened her shoulders and fixed Jennifer with a look that could have cut glass. "You know what, Jennifer? It's easy to preach about grace and rising above when you've never had to face the kind of institutional resistance I've encountered. Some of us don't have the luxury of playing by rules that were never designed to include us in the first place." Jennifer's eyebrow arched slightly, her expression remaining maddeningly calm. "Institutional resistance?" she repeated softly, her voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity mixed with steel. "Meghan, I grew up in Chicago's South Side. My grandmother cleaned houses. My mother worked 3 jobs. I auditioned for roles where they told me I was too dark, too heavy, too urban. I've been passed over, overlooked, and underestimated more times than I can count. But I never confused obstacles with excuses." The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the conversation had moved far beyond typical late-night banter into something raw and unscripted. Meghan's jaw tightened, her hands clasping so firmly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. "That's different, and you know it," she snapped, her practice media training beginning to fray at the edges. "You were fighting for roles, for recognition. I was fighting against centuries of tradition, against an entire monarchy that saw me as a threat to their precious status quo." Jennifer leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, but there was nothing warm about it. "Ah, there it is," she said quietly. "The real issue isn't about fighting systems or breaking barriers. It's about not getting the reception you felt you deserved. You walked into one of the most respected institutions in the world and expected them to change everything to accommodate you. When they didn't, you decided the problem was them, not your approach." Meghan's face flushed deeper, her voice rising despite her obvious efforts to maintain control. "I brought authenticity to an archaic system. I brought diversity, modernity, real connection with people. They'd handle change couldn't, so they made me the villain." The studio fell silent except for the quiet hum of the cameras capturing every micro-expression, every telling pause. Jennifer studied Meghan for a long moment before responding, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had earned her wisdom through genuine struggle rather than manufactured controversy. Authenticity isn't something you bring like a gift basket, Meghan. It's something you are consistently, whether cameras are rolling or not. And real change doesn't happen by demanding that everyone else adjust to your vision. It happens by proving your worth through service, through humility, through understanding that joining something bigger than yourself means sometimes putting your ego aside. Jimmy attempted once more to regain control of his show, his discomfort now visible to everyone watching. Maybe we should focus on the positive impact both of you have had in your respective fields. Jennifer, your work with various charities has been incredible, and Meghan, your advocacy has certainly sparked important conversations. But Meghan wasn't finished. Her voice took on that particular tone reserved for moments when someone believes they're delivering a devastating blow. It's fascinating how some people confuse compliance with virtue. Not everyone can afford to stay quiet and grateful when injustice is staring them in the face. Some of us have to speak truth to power, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Jennifer's response was immediate and devastating in its quiet authority. Speaking truth to power, she repeated, her voice dropping to that rich, resonant tone that commanded attention without demanding it. Meghan, you weren't speaking truth to power. You were weaponizing your pain for profit. There's a difference between advocacy and exploitation, between courage and calculation. The words landed like a physical blow. Meghan's mouth opened slightly, her breath catching audibly in the microphone. For the first time since walking onto the stage, she looked genuinely rattled, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling under the weight of Jennifer's unflinching honesty. Jennifer continued, her voice never rising but somehow filling the entire studio with its quiet power. Real advocacy doesn't require burning bridges or destroying relationships. It doesn't require turning every personal struggle into public content. Martin Luther King didn't change the world by complaining about how unfairly he was treated. Maya Angelou didn't build her legacy by tearing down other women. They changed hearts and minds through their example, their grace, their unwavering commitment to something greater than themselves. The comparison hung in the air like a judgment. Meghan's face had gone pale now, her usual arsenal of deflections and rehearsed responses seemingly exhausted. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, then opened it again, but no words came. The woman who had commanded global attention through carefully orchestrated interviews and strategic revelations found herself speechless in the face of genuine moral authority. Jennifer's expression softened slightly, though her words remained firm. I don't question your pain, Meghan. I don't doubt that you faced challenges and disappointments, but pain doesn't give you the right to diminish others who've walked similar paths with more grace. Your struggles don't make you special. How you handle them does. The silence that followed was crushing. Even the studio audience seemed afraid to breathe, sensing they were witnessing something that transcended entertainment and ventured into the realm of genuine human reckoning. Meghan sat frozen in her chair, her composure completely shattered, her face a mask of barely contained humiliation and rage. Jimmy made one final attempt to salvage the segment. Well, I think we can all agree that both of our guests have faced unique challenges and found their own ways to navigate them. Perhaps we can end on a positive note by talking about what's next for both of you. But Jennifer wasn't quite finished. She turned slightly toward Meghan, her voice gentle but implacable. You know what I wish for you, Meghan? I wish you could find peace with who you are without needing to tear down who others are. I wish you could discover that real strength comes from building up rather than breaking down. And I wish you could understand that the world doesn't owe you anything simply because you exist, but it will give you everything if you prove you deserve it through your actions rather than your accusations. The final blow was delivered with such calm authority that it took a moment for its full impact to register. When it did, Meghan's face crumpled slightly, her eyes glistening with what might have been tears or might have been fury. Her hands trembled as she reached for her water glass, her movement jerky and uncertain. Jennifer sat back in her chair, her expression returning to its earlier warmth as she smiled at Jimmy. I think that's probably enough heavy conversation for one evening, don't you think? The audience needs some music to cleanse the palate after all this drama. The studio erupted in applause, not the polite golf claps that had greeted Meghan's entrance, but genuine, thunderous appreciation for what they had just witnessed. Jennifer Hudson had done something remarkable, Without raising her voice, without resorting to personal attacks, without abandoning her innate grace, she had completely dismantled someone who had built a career on playing the victim while claiming to be the hero. Meghan remained silent, her face a study in barely controlled emotion. The woman who had dominated headlines for years, who had commanded global attention through calculated revelations and strategic interviews, had been reduced to speechlessness by someone whose authenticity made her own carefully crafted image look hollow and manufactured. As the applause died down, Jimmy attempted to restore some semblance of normalcy to his show. "Jennifer, would you be willing to give us a song before we wrap up? Something tells me the audience would love to hear that incredible voice of yours." Jennifer's face lit up with genuine joy, the tension of the previous moment seeming to evaporate as she considered the request. "Of course, Jimmy. Music has always been my way of healing, of connecting, of reminding us all that despite our differences, we share the same hopes and dreams." She stood gracefully, moving toward the small stage area where a microphone waited. As she positioned herself, she glanced back at Meghan, who remained seated on the couch, looking smaller somehow, entered the studio. There than when she had first was no malice in Jennifer's gaze, no triumph, just a kind of sadness for someone who seemed so lost in their own narrative of grievance. The opening notes filled the studio, and Jennifer's voice soared above the instrumental, rich and powerful and absolutely authentic. She sang about overcoming, about rising above circumstances, about finding strength in vulnerability and grace in adversity. The lyrics seemed to speak directly to the moment they had all just experienced, offering both challenge and comfort to anyone listening. As Jennifer's voice filled the studio, something magical happened. The tension that had gripped the audience for the past 20 minutes began to dissolve, replaced by something deeper and more healing. Her song wasn't just performance, it was testimony, a living example of how real strength manifests not through accusations or demands, but through the simple act of sharing your gift with the world. Meghan remained frozen on the couch, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. The woman who had spent years crafting her public image as a beacon of authenticity now found herself exposed as something far less genuine. Every calculated word she had spoken, every rehearsed talking point she had delivered, seemed hollow against the backdrop of Jennifer's effortless grace. The cameras captured it all: Meghan's rigid posture, her clenched hands, the way her eyes darted between Jennifer and the exit as though calculating her escape route. This wasn't the composed Duchess who had sat down with Oprah or the confident speaker who had delivered carefully scripted speeches about empowerment. This was someone whose entire narrative had been stripped away, leaving behind only the uncomfortable reality of who she actually was. When Jennifer finished her song, the studio erupted in applause that went on for nearly a full minute. She smiled genuinely, bowing slightly to acknowledge the appreciation before returning to her seat. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While Meghan had spent the evening demanding respect and recognition, Jennifer had simply demonstrated why she deserved both. Jimmy attempted to wrap up the segment with his usual enthusiasm, but the energy in the room had fundamentally shifted. "Thank you both for being here tonight," he said, though his smile seemed forced. "This has certainly been an enlightening conversation. Jennifer, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Your music continues to inspire millions." Jennifer nodded graciously. "Thank you for having me, Jimmy. It's always wonderful to connect with your audience. Music is the universal language, and I'm grateful for every opportunity to share it." Jimmy turned to Meghan, his professional obligation clear despite the obvious discomfort. "And Meghan, thank you for joining us as well. I'm sure our viewers appreciated hearing your perspective on various issues." Meghan managed a tight smile, her voice carefully controlled. "Thank you, Jimmy. It's always interesting to engage in meaningful dialogue, even when others prefer comfortable narratives over difficult truths." The comment was clearly intended as a parting shot, but it fell flat in the wake of everything that had preceded it. Jennifer simply smiled, saying nothing. Her silence spoke volumes, demonstrating the kind of confidence that doesn't need the last word to claim victory. She had said everything that needed saying, and the audience understood exactly what had transpired. As the show moved toward its closing credits, the contrast between the two women remained stark. Jennifer sat relaxed, her natural warmth radiating outward, while Meghan appeared rigid and defensive, her carefully constructed image in shambles. The woman who had built a career on controlling narratives had just lost control completely, undone not by aggression or hostility, but by simple, unvarnished truth. The moment the camera stopped rolling, Meghan was on her feet, moving toward the exit with barely concealed haste. She offered no goodbyes, no pleasantries, just the stiff formality of someone whose pride had been thoroughly wounded. Her heels clicked sharply against the studio floor as she disappeared backstage, leaving behind the echo of her humiliation. Jennifer, meanwhile, remained on set, chatting warmly with Jimmy and the crew, signing autographs for audience members, embodying the kind of grace that had made her beloved long before she ever won an Oscar or Grammy. She moved through the crowd like someone genuinely happy to connect with others, her earlier firmness replaced by the warmth that was clearly her default setting. Behind the scenes, the show's producers were already recognizing the magnitude of what they had captured. This wasn't just another celebrity interview that would be forgotten by morning. This was a moment that would be dissected, analyzed, and replayed across every media platform for weeks to come. They had witnessed something rare in modern entertainment, genuine authenticity confronting calculated performance, and authenticity had won decisively. The audience filed out buzzing with conversation, many pulling out their phones to share what they had just witnessed. Social media began lighting up within minutes, clips of Jennifer's most devastating comments spreading like wildfire. The phrases that would define the evening were already emerging. Pain doesn't make you special. Weaponizing your pain for profit. Real strength comes from building up rather than breaking down. News outlets began picking up the story before the show had even finished airing on the West Coast. Entertainment reporters who had grown weary of Meghan's carefully orchestrated victim narrative found themselves energized by Jennifer's unflinching response. Finally, someone with unquestionable credibility had said what many had been thinking but were afraid to voice. The commentary that followed would be swift and decisive. Jennifer Hudson, the girl from Chicago's South Side, who had overcome genuine hardship to become one of America's most beloved entertainers, had done something remarkable. She had exposed the difference between authentic struggle and manufactured grievance, between real advocacy and opportunistic exploitation. Meghan's representatives would spend the following days trying to control the damage, releasing carefully worded statements about the importance of supporting women's voices and the dangers of silencing those who speak truth to power. But their efforts would fall flat against the backdrop of what millions had witnessed with their own eyes. The irony was inescapable. Meghan had spent years positioning herself as the victim of unfair treatment, claiming that powerful people had tried to silence her voice. Yet when faced with someone whose voice carried genuine moral authority, she had been the one left speechless. Her own narrative had crumbled under the weight of its contradictions. Jennifer, for her part, would handle the aftermath with the same grace she had displayed during the confrontation itself. In subsequent interviews, she would refuse to gloat or elaborate further on her comments, simply stating that she believed in accountability and authenticity. She had said what needed to be said, and she was content to let her words stand on their own merit. The entertainment industry took notice. Here was someone who could deliver devastating truths without losing her essential humanity, who could hold others accountable without abandoning her own principles. Jennifer Hudson had reminded everyone what real strength looked like, and the contrast with Meghan's performative activism couldn't have been more clear. Critics who had long groaned of celebrity tire activism built, and rather on grief than genuine service, found themselves reinvigorated. Jennifer had demonstrated that it was possible to address difficult topics, to challenge others, to speak uncomfortable truths, all while maintaining dignity and grace. She had shown that you didn't need to tear others down to build yourself up. The moment would be remembered as a masterclass in authentic communication. Jennifer had taken everything Meghan threw at her and transformed it into an opportunity to demonstrate real wisdom, real strength, real leadership. She had turned what could have been a bitter exchange into a teaching moment, offering viewers a glimpse of what genuine character looked like under pressure. As news of the confrontation spread internationally, reactions varied dramatically. In Britain, where Meghan's departure from royal duties had left lasting divisions, many saw Jennifer's comments as validation of their own feelings about the former Duchess. Here was an American, someone with impeccable credentials and unquestioned integrity, saying what they had been thinking all along. The royal family maintained their traditional silence, but palace insiders reportedly expressed quiet satisfaction that someone had finally challenged Meghan's narrative with such authority. After years of calculated attacks on the institution, someone had finally stood up and delivered the kind of response that palace protocols prevented them from making themselves. Mental health advocates found themselves in an interesting position. While many supported open discussions about emotional struggles, Jennifer's comments about not weaponizing pain for profit resonated with professionals who had grown concerned about the commercialization of trauma narratives. There was an important distinction between sharing your story to help others and exploiting your pain for personal gain. The feminist community was similarly divided. Some criticized Jennifer for not supporting another woman, regardless of their differences, but others argued that real feminism required holding all women accountable for their actions and words, not providing unconditional support simply based on gender. Jennifer's willingness to challenge Meghan was seen by many as an act of feminist courage. Celebrity culture itself seemed to shift slightly in the wake of the confrontation. Jennifer had demonstrated that it was possible to be successful, respected, and influential without constantly positioning yourself as a victim. Her approach offered an alternative to the grievance-based activism that had dominated entertainment industry discourse for years. The conversation about authenticity in public life gained new momentum. Jennifer's calm dismantling of Meghan's carefully constructed image had exposed how much of modern celebrity culture was built on performance rather than genuine character. Audiences began demanding more substance and less spectacle from their public figures. As the days passed and the full impact of the confrontation became clear, one thing was certain: Jennifer Hudson had accomplished something remarkable. Without losing her essential grace, without abandoning her core values, without resorting to the tactics of those she criticized, she had delivered one of the most devastating and decisive victories in recent entertainment history. She had proven that truth, delivered with wisdom and authority, remained the most powerful force in any conversation. The aftermath rippled through every corner of the entertainment industry like an earthquake whose tremors would be felt for months to come. Within hours of the show airing, social media platforms exploded with reactions that ranged from stunned admiration to fierce debate. The hashtag #JenniferDestroysMeghan began trending worldwide, accumulating millions of posts as viewers shared clips, quotes, and their own commentary on what they had witnessed. Entertainment journalists who had covered both women extensively found themselves scrambling to analyze the seismic shift in public perception. Jennifer's surgical dismantling of Meghan's victim narrative had been so thorough, so devastating in its quiet authority, that it left little room for counter-argument. The woman who had built her post-royal career on carefully curated grievances had been exposed as hollow by someone whose authentic strength made the contrast undeniable. Late-night comedy shows pounced on the material with gleeful abandon. Comedians who had previously treaded carefully around Meghan's carefully constructed image now felt emboldened to point out the contradictions that Jennifer had so eloquently highlighted. The jokes practically wrote themselves. Here was someone who claimed to want privacy while signing lucrative media deals, who spoke about authenticity while delivering obviously rehearsed talking points, who demanded respect while showing none to others. Television executives began reassessing their approach to celebrity interviews entirely. The Tonight Show's ratings for that particular episode shattered records, proving that audiences hungered for genuine moments over manufactured drama. The appetite for real conversation, for authentic confrontation between people with actual substance, had been demonstrated in the most dramatic way possible. Media training consultants found their phones ringing constantly as representatives for various celebrities sought guidance on how to handle similar situations. "How do you prepare for someone like Jennifer Hudson?" they asked. "How do you counter authenticity with talking points? How do you manufacture gravitas when faced with someone who has earned theirs through genuine struggle and consistent character?" The answer, uncomfortable as it was for many in the industry, was that you simply couldn't. Meghan's team worked frantically behind the scenes to contain the damage, but their efforts only served to highlight the problems Jennifer had identified. Every statement they released, every interview they arranged, every attempt to reframe the narrative felt calculated and artificial. The more they tried to control the story, the more obvious it became that Jennifer's criticisms had been accurate. The contrast became even starker when Jennifer's response to the growing media attention was measured and gracious. She declined to elaborate on her comments, simply stating that she believed in accountability and hoped the conversation might encourage more authentic dialogue in public life. Her refusal to capitalize on the moment, to turn it into content or leverage it for personal gain, only reinforced the points she had made during the confrontation. International media coverage focused heavily on the cultural implications of the exchange. Here was an American entertainer, someone with unquestionable credentials and moral authority, delivering the kind of direct assessment that British protocol had prevented the royal family from making themselves. The validation was implicit, but unmistakable. Someone with no connection to the monarchy had reached the same conclusions about Meghan's character and motivations. The royal family's continued silence spoke volumes. Palace insiders, speaking anonymously to trusted journalists, expressed quiet satisfaction that someone had finally addressed the elephant in the room. After years of careful diplomacy and restrained responses to increasingly provocative attacks, it was refreshing to see someone with the moral authority to push back effectively. Mental health professionals found themselves engaged in complex discussions about the line between advocacy and exploitation. Jennifer's comments about weaponizing pain for profit resonated deeply with practitioners who had grown concerned about the commercialization of trauma narratives. There was an important distinction, they noted, between sharing personal struggles to help others heal and packaging those struggles as content for personal gain. The entertainment industry's response revealed deep fractures that had been building for years. Veteran performers and industry professionals largely supported Jennifer's stance, recognizing the wisdom in her approach and the authenticity of her character. Newer celebrities, particularly those who had built careers on social media and personal branding, found themselves questioning their own approaches to public engagement. Awards show producers began reconsidering their approaches to political content and social messaging. The contrast between Jennifer's earned authority and Meghan's manufactured activism had highlighted how hollow much of celebrity advocacy had become. Audiences clearly craved substance over spectacle, genuine commitment over performative gesturing. The moment sparked broader conversations about privilege, responsibility, and the nature of authentic leadership. Jennifer's background, her journey from genuine hardship to earned success, her consistent demonstration of character under pressure, provided a template for what real influence looked like. The comparison with Meghan's approach, built on grievance and victimhood despite enormous privilege, could not have been more stark. Publishing houses that had eagerly courted celebrity memoirs focused on trauma and struggle began reassessing their strategies. The market for manufactured victimhood narratives appeared to be shifting, with readers growing more sophisticated about distinguishing between genuine testimony and opportunistic exploitation. Jennifer's authentic voice had exposed how artificial many of these offerings had become. University professors teaching courses on media studies and celebrity culture found themselves with a perfect case study in authenticity versus performance. The confrontation provided clear examples of how genuine character manifested under pressure compared to carefully constructed public personas when challenged by someone with real moral authority. The legal implications were minimal but symbolically important. Meghan's representatives made no attempt to challenge Jennifer's characterizations, implicitly acknowledging that the criticisms were based on observable behavior and public statements rather than false claims. The silence was deafening and telling. International diplomacy experts noted the potential implications for how American and British relations might be affected. Jennifer's comments, coming from someone with impeccable credentials and widespread respect, provided cover for more direct criticism of Meghan's impact on the royal family and Anglo-American relations more broadly. The conversation about women supporting women evolved in important ways following the confrontation. Many feminists argued that Jennifer's willingness to hold another woman accountable represented the highest form of sisterhood, refusing to provide unconditional support based solely on gender, while demanding the same standards of character and integrity from everyone. Corporate sponsors and brand partners began quietly reassessing their relationships with celebrities who had built their platforms on grievance narratives. The market research was clear. Audiences responded more favorably to positive, constructive messaging than to constant complaints and victimhood positioning. Jennifer's approach offered a more appealing alternative for brands seeking authentic partnerships. The ripple effects extended into political discourse as well. Jennifer's demonstration that it was possible to address difficult topics, challenge others, and speak uncomfortable truths while maintaining dignity and grace provided a model that many political figures found appealing. The contrast with more combative approaches to advocacy was instructive. Social media platforms found themselves grappling with the aftermath as users shared clips and commentary that often pushed the boundaries of their community guidelines. The enthusiasm for Jennifer's authentic response created challenges for moderators trying to balance free expression with policies against harassment. Though the overwhelming sentiment supported Jennifer's approach, the moment became a cultural touchstone referenced in everything from academic papers to stand-up comedy routines. Jennifer Hudson had managed to crystallize something many people felt but had struggled to articulate about the difference between genuine struggle and performative victimhood. Her words provided language for concepts that had been difficult to express without appearing unsympathetic to legitimate grievances. As the weeks passed and the full scope of the confrontation's impact became clear, one conclusion emerged with startling clarity. Jennifer Hudson had accomplished something remarkable in the modern media landscape. She had demonstrated that authentic character, genuine wisdom, and moral authority could still triumph over manufactured narratives and calculated positioning. In an age of careful media training and strategic messaging, her unvarnished honesty had cut through the noise to deliver truths that audiences desperately needed to hear. The entertainment industry would never be quite the same. Jennifer had raised the bar for authentic engagement while exposing the hollow nature of much celebrity activism. Her approach offered a roadmap for how public figures could address difficult topics, challenge others, and maintain their integrity simultaneously. The contrast with Meghan's approach would serve as a lasting reminder that real strength comes not from claiming victimhood, but from demonstrating character when faced with genuine challenges. The moment had transcended entertainment to become something larger, a cultural reset that demanded more authenticity and less performance from public figures. Jennifer Hudson had not just destroyed Meghan Markle's carefully constructed narrative, she had shown the world what genuine leadership looked like in action, providing a masterclass in how to wield influence responsibly while maintaining the grace and dignity that made such influence worth having in the first place. The transformation in public discourse was immediate and undeniable. Within days of the confrontation, think pieces appeared in major publications dissecting what had transpired and why it resonated so powerfully with audiences worldwide. Cultural critics who had grown weary of performative activism found themselves energized by Jennifer's approach, recognizing it as a return to substance over spectacle. Academic institutions began incorporating the exchange into their curricula, using it as a case study in authentic communication versus manufactured messaging. Communications professors found themselves with perfect examples of how genuine authority manifested differently from claimed victimhood, how earned respect contrasted sharply with demanded deference. The moment sparked conversations in corporate boardrooms about the nature of influence and leadership. Business schools added the confrontation to their case studies, examining how Jennifer's approach demonstrated principles that transcended entertainment and applied to any situation where authentic leadership was required. Her ability to maintain composure while delivering devastating truths became a model for executive training programs. Religious leaders found themselves referencing the exchange in sermons about truth, accountability, and the difference between righteous anger and petty grievance. Jennifer's combination of firmness and grace resonated with spiritual communities that valued both justice and mercy, showing how one could challenge behavior without abandoning compassion. The international press coverage revealed fascinating cultural differences in how the confrontation was perceived. Countries with strong traditions of direct communication praised Jennifer's willingness to speak plainly, while cultures that prioritized diplomatic language were divided on whether her approach was appropriate or too harsh. Psychologists and behavioral experts weighed in extensively, analyzing the dynamics of the exchange and what it revealed about different approaches to public engagement. Jennifer's calm authority was contrasted with defensive reactions, providing insights into how secure individuals responded differently to challenges than those whose identity depended on external validation. The comedy circuit embraced the moment with enthusiasm that bordered on celebration. Comedians who had felt constrained by political correctness found Jennifer's example liberating, showing how one could address difficult topics with humor and insight while maintaining respect for human dignity. The contrast between authentic wit and calculated messaging became a frequent theme in stand-up routines. Publishing industry insiders noted a shift in what readers were seeking from celebrity books and memoirs. The appetite for grievance narratives appeared to be diminishing, while demand grew for stories of genuine overcoming, authentic struggle, and constructive approaches to adversity. Jennifer's example had seemingly recalibrated public taste toward more substantive content. Television producers found themselves reconsidering their approaches to talk shows and celebrity interviews. The Tonight Show episode had demonstrated that audiences craved real conversation over manufactured drama, authentic moments over carefully scripted exchanges. The rating success proved that substance could be more compelling than sensationalism. Marketing professionals studied the aftermath intensively, recognizing that Jennifer's authentic approach had generated more positive engagement than years of calculated campaigns could achieve. Her refusal to exploit the moment for personal gain only increased public respect, providing valuable lessons about the long-term benefits of genuine character over short-term opportunism. What started as a routine late-night appearance became a defining moment that exposed the stark difference between genuine character and carefully crafted performance. Jennifer Hudson didn't just win an argument that evening, she demonstrated what authentic strength looks like when faced with manufactured victimhood. Her calm dismantling of empty narratives reminded everyone that real influence comes from building others up, not tearing institutions down for personal gain. In a world hungry for substance over spectacle, Jennifer proved that truth delivered with grace remains the most powerful force in any conversation.